I've done some extensive research on how gamers, well, play, through a survey called It Doesn't Exist, and after much debate, I've come to the conclusion that 95% of people who play video games button mash. Surely this game should have sold well. Oh. Released in September of 2017, Fire Emblem Warriors is an adrenaline-fueled action RPG developed by Koei Tecmo. It depicts characters from various games across the Fire Emblem franchise in a hack-and-slash environment, combining elements from the tactical gameplay of Fire Emblem and that of Koei Tecmo's Samurai Warriors. As such, this crossover title gives priority to the gameplay, with the fleshed-out crafting system providing added depth to its defining aspect. Regarding the narrative, it follows the structure of a typical Fire Emblem game, whilst being faithful to the portrayal of the characters. It ultimately makes this feel like the greatest dose of fanservice for fans of Fire Emblem and the flashy gameplay of the Warriors series. I'm positive there's a small cross-section of people who like both of them, myself included, but it still manages to offer a memorable experience nonetheless. The image of me cleaving through hordes of foes, with blows that makes the sword seem much bigger than it needs to be, will forever be engraved in my head. I have my gripes on the game, but all of that is forgiven with the addictive gameplay that constitutes the majority of Fire Emblem Warriors. Put this into perspective. You walk into the battlefield and you're greeted by an army of thousands. This game, however, takes the phrase one-man army quite too literally. It treats almost every enemy like dust particles because they are absolutely harmless and disperse into nothingness with a mere few strikes. That's the charm of the Warriors games, and it certainly shines here. The battles that occur usually take place between two armies, with the uncommon exception of a third party, and are spread across multiple maps reminiscent of classic Fire Emblem settings. You are tasked with accomplishing a given objective, including the capture of a fort and escorting endangered villagers to safety. There are sub-missions that don't need to be completed to secure a victory, but failing to achieve them hinders your ability to progress. This effectively raises the stakes for a fight, beyond ensuring that a certain unit or your allied base does not fall. Each character follows a set of inputs, using normal and strong attacks for purposes such as clearing the area, bringing enemies airborne for further combos, and exposing the weakness, the stun gauge, of enemy officers. Reducing the stun gauge to 0 takes away a large portion of a major enemy's health, so there's some level of strategy in exposing that gauge. You can unleash a warrior special accessed by filling up a bar of the special meter, which deals massive damage and eliminates a field of foes. The flashiness of those moves ups the ante of a battle and really puts you in the position of an unstoppable beast. Other forms of movement like dodging and guarding are present, though in a game where you're constantly on the offense, you tend to rely less on it than you would in a game like Dark Souls. The application of guarding is rendered pretty much useless, since combo strings already stun your enemy and prevents them from attacking, so these inputs lose meaning when compared to the attack buttons. As mentioned previously, Koei Tecmo did implement some key mechanics that make up the appeal of Fire Emblem games, one of which is the pairing system. Featured prominently in Fire Emblem Awakening and Fates, this system allows the character you are playing to pair up with another unit from your team that you have assigned. In doing so, they are not able to contribute separately on the battlefield, but they assist your character by blocking hits for you or revealing the stun gauge. The effectiveness of their assistance is boosted by their support level, another aspect of Fire Emblem, which is developed by defeating enemy officers whilst paired up. If at least one bar of special meter is filled up for both of the paired up units, they can perform what is termed a dual muso. The pair teams up to combine their warrior specials into one for a destructive attack that no enemy in a large radius can escape or survive. This occurring in-game is probably the pinnacle of the flashy and stylish attacks witnessed in the Warriors games. It never fails to impress me, and for some reason, I don't get tired of it. But the slight frame rate drops bore me out a little. The Switch doubles as a handheld and as a console, and it sometimes can't fully handle the sheer awesomeness of the dual muso sometimes. The weapon triangle is an integral factor to the strategic gameplay of Fire Emblem, and it is transferred here, albeit not as significantly. You battle either at an advantage or a disadvantage, depending on the weapon user you're fighting, but ultimately it doesn't make much of a difference. It takes longer for you to kill an officer who is effective to your weapon type, since you can't expose their stun gauge, but you'll still prevail regardless since every blow you land cancels theirs. You'd better be off not engaging an axe unit with a sword unit, not because they pose a threat, but rather because it consumes valuable time. Mounted units as seen in Fire Emblem make a frequent appearance here. The flying units such as Jada from Shadow Dragon and Hinoka from Fates are extremely vulnerable to archers like Takumi, but as per tradition, they are able to proceed across the map with the highest speed. Hazardous terrain like lava can be avoided by flying units, as well as gaps that cannot be trespassed by those on the ground. Using them in battle would allow you to reach destinations at a much faster rate, which makes for a high risk, high reward unit. There are dragon units as well, which are more difficult to eliminate due to their larger amount of health, but can easily be defeated using weapons like Mars Falchion, which is effective against dragons. Moreover, there's an interesting mechanic that is featured prominently across the Warriors games. Here, it is ever so smartly called Awakening. This puts your character in a powered up state, as if they haven't been already, dealing more damage and nulling the weapon triangle by giving you the advantage over any officer. You can prolong the duration of the Awakening by increasing their KO count, or in other words bully the opposing army. Players can choose to end the Awakening meter early by pressing A and allowing it to deplete naturally over time. Both results in a finishing attack superior in damage and range to a normal warrior special. Moving on to the camp, this comprises a big part of character progression beyond leveling up in battle. You acquire weapons by winning battles, and get rarer, stronger weapons adjacent to an increase in difficulty. In a similar manner, materials are also collected through defeating enemies, and different materials are dropped depending on their weapon types. You can use these materials to forge crests, which bring out the full potential of a character. They are pivotal for unlocking the full combo string, though they serve a slew of other very useful purposes to improve your unit. Crests can provide units with additional warrior gauges, fill the special meter faster, increase the number of uses for healing items, reduce the damage taken from different weapon types, allow units to use stronger weapons, and various stat boosts modelled after skills from the Fire Emblem series. Once a character is at level 15 or higher, you can create search crests using Fire Emblem's signature Master Seal, which promotes a unit to an advanced class. As a result, this gives way for more crests to be unlocked and forged, bolstering the attributes of a unit even further. It's a glorified skill tree, but the extra steps you need to take in order to access the different nodes gives you an incentive to undergo what is otherwise a pretty repetitive battle. You also have the option to refine the weapons you've acquired, attaching new attributes to them like increasing rarity of weapon drops, strengthening normal attacks, and breaking armor when the stun gauge is depleted. These in turn contribute to your personalized build of a unit. Alongside the combat, it's satisfying to develop some of my favourite Fire Emblem characters by equipping them with the ideal weapons and attributes. Overall, the components that build up the gameplay, the meat and potatoes of Fire Emblem Warriors, leads to an engaging and gratifying experience that keeps players hooked in, despite the essence of repetition. For the sake of us watching, I'm not gonna dive into spoiler territory here. Explaining the necessary details would make this video longer than it needs to be. You start as either Rowan or Liana, the game's respective male or female options sharing the same moveset, who are twin siblings set to rule the kingdom of Aetolis. The game applies the universal Fire Emblem story formula, making the player follow the journey of an up-and-coming lord. They are subjected to the various trials of upholding responsibility by defeating those threatening the peace of Aetolis, and their victories in battle serve as a testament to their ability to rule the kingdom. Warriors puts a twist on the formula by having legendary heroes from across the franchise aid the young twins on the battlefield, in exchange for Rowan and Liana helping them to return to their own world. We witness a gradual growth of the lords, with advice from the experience that the other heroes gain in their ventures, as they shape themselves into worthy protectors of Aetolis. As far as villains go, this game isn't a far cry from what we've seen previously in Fire Emblem. A likeable character which players affiliate with at the beginning is used as a vessel to revive an evil dragon bent on consuming the world. Alongside that, dark mages from Shadow Dragon, Awakening and Fates are present to halt the heroes in their tracks, though they do not contribute significantly to the narrative. Seeing these characters obliterate armies single-handedly is eye candy enough, but the sight of them interacting as if they comprise one big alliance is truly mesmerizing to Fire Emblem fans. The dialogue can be corny and often predictable, as seen in support conversations and story cutscenes, but that ultimately makes up the charm of Fire Emblem. It hammers in that message of trust and coordination. The chemistry between the characters you play as is evident, and the vocal performances elevate the sense of conviction that everyone has. In turn, it makes you feel that essence of hope, the will to strive on in spite of anything that comes at you. Be it one soldier or 1,000, having faith in yourself can overcome them all. The roster is where my strongest gripes of the game come into effect. Fire Emblem Warriors is comprised of a cast of characters originating from Shadow Dragon, Awakening, Fates, Gaiden, and Blazing Blade. There is a total of 23 characters on the base roster once fully unlocked, and 30 overall including DLC. However, with only the base roster considered, 9 of them are from Fates, which is more than 1/3 of the roster at launch. For a series that had 15 games by then, only 5 are represented, with one of them taking up the majority of the roster. The lack of diversity and representation in a crossover title is quite disappointing, especially when the concept had so much potential for being executed well. It's very unnecessary to incorporate all the royal family members of Hoshido and Nor. We could have settled for Corrin, Ryoma, and Xander, and Asura, and therefore more space for characters from other Fire Emblem games could be freed out. Having to imagine that fan favourites, who are arguably more recognisable, like Ike, Roy, Hector, Eluid and Ephraim, were snubbed for Fate's characters is honestly a knife to the chest. And regarding those that are playable, there is a notable absence of unique playstyles. Out of the full 30-strong roster, 11 of them share the same playstyles as other characters. Hyrule Warriors had one less character for their full roster, and all of them had unique playstyles, with some characters having multiple distinct playstyles to choose from. I don't see why there should be an issue when it comes to Fire Emblem, especially with the series hosting an array of weapon types and classes. The season pass containing the DLC characters is £18, though 5 out of the 9 that are provided are just clones of existing characters. Locking characters with copy and pasted movesets behind a paywall is kinda scummy, to be blunt. I don't really mind that these characters are from games already represented in Warriors, but they could have at least had distinguishable playstyles to add value to the DLC. Otherwise, what we have in Fire Emblem Warriors is decent, and I enjoy playing these characters, but the roster leaves a lot to be desired. As far as the music goes, I think the soundtrack in Fire Emblem Warriors speaks for itself. The Fire Emblem series is renowned for its exceptional music, bolstering its quality since the release of Path of Radiance on the GameCube. The soundtrack of Warriors features remixed music from Shadow Dragon, Awakening, and some from other titles in the franchise, with 2 versions of the different themes, a calm and battle variant, as depicted since Awakening. Alongside those music tracks, the game is accompanied by its own selection of music tracks, most notably for the story mode, which are equally as good as the remixes. For a Warriors game, it's not surprising that there's some guitar mixed in with the orchestra. It's meant to make you feel like you're fighting a battle you can't lose. Some of the remixes do sound less tumultuous than its original counterpart, but in the end it falls down to interpretation. I'll play the Fates version and the Warriors version of View of the Light side by side and let you be the judge of that. Having just one piece of music play through the entire battle would only add to the repetition, though the game spices things up by introducing another track into the mix when you have to complete the final mission of a map. The soundtrack is amazing and is certainly one of the highlights of this game. The game's story mode offers a decently sized experience if we're talking length, with a 10 to 15 hour long campaign. What stretches out the longevity of the game, however, is the history mode. This mode is unlocked after completing Chapter 5 in the story mode, and provides a cluster of content to sink your time into. As implied in the title, each of the 6 maps in history mode are essentially elaborate retellings of significant events that have occurred throughout the Fire Emblem franchise. Each unit spread across the map in the original level from their respective games is replaced by a different battle, each with their own difficulty, conditions, and layout. It succeeds in its goal to emulate these historic moments in the series, and it's quite a blast to play through them. What throws me off slightly is the uneven distribution of enemy levels in the maps. Granted, it puts forward a challenge to my strongest units, but seeing that a battle with level 10 enemies, and one where they are level 113 coexist in the same map is a bit baffling. But alas, you're not required to rout the enemy, so you are given the option to avoid some battles which you are not prepared to fight. Nonetheless, the difficulty scaling caters to players that have grinded enough to tackle these levels, and those who have only just begun the arduous journey of leveling up. Some of the DLC maps do feel borderline unbeatable if your units lack the necessary experience, but it's laid out on the history mode menu so that each map gets progressively harder and more rewarding as you go. There's another factor that extends the massive amount of replayability that Fire Emblem has. After a history mode map is cleared, intruder units that aren't a part of the original map appear through space-time distortions. They are significantly stronger than the enemies on the maps you completed, but it supplies you with tremendous rewards to reinforce the units even further, as well as a new ending. Throughout the campaign and history mode, recurring Fire Emblem character Anna appears in various maps after certain conditions are cleared. She gives a collectible item in the form of Anna's mementos, which are used to fill up beautiful 3D art of the characters interacting. It's nothing much, but it adds an extra layer of replayability and makes every single Earth dollar worth being spent on this game. Fire Emblem Warriors has stood the test of time as one of the best Warriors games ever made, a shining example of the stylish and dynamic Musou genre. Aside from their shallow interpretation of giving orders to units on the battlefield, many notable mechanics from Fire Emblem are implemented in the gameplay, which in itself is the true essence of a game like this. The campaign, while not as emotionally impactful and profound as the narrative of most Fire Emblem games, harkens back to the core of their stories, the fundamentals of what makes the franchise so beloved by fans. Characters interact with such a strong chemistry between them, partially due to their faithful depiction in the game. Its soundtrack is unsurprisingly an enjoyable listen that certainly elevates the feeling of mowing through thousands of enemies. The quality of the remixes in comparison to their original counterparts is debatable, but Fire Emblem music seems impossible not to love. The game also hosts a plethora of post-game content that will keep completionists hooked on for hours on end. It is satisfying reliving some of the big moments that have happened throughout the series in the format of a Warriors game. Though the roster left a lot to be desired, what we currently have is more than sufficient to keep players occupied. Fire Emblem Warriors delivers a memorable experience fueled by fan service, and is a standout title from the vast library of games on the Switch. Azura is the best character in the game.